Previously on PGstats Regional Spotlight, we took a peek behind the curtain of Tri-State, one of the strongholds of competitive Smash. This time around, let's take a trip down I-85 and discuss a region that has slowly but surely been pumping out more talent in recent years, the Southeast. A special thank you to all the representatives from each scene that we interviewed for this piece. Cam Steele from North Carolina, Mage and Frozen from South Carolina, Wrath from Georgia, Cake from Alabama, El Jefe from Mississippi, and King Vassar from Louisiana. Southeast is a very broad term, and most people's definitions of what makes up the Southeast could vary from as far north as Virginia to as far west as Louisiana, as well as everything in between. In the context of Smash's region map, however, the states in question are as follows: North and South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. If you live in any of these states, it's easier than you think to be near a growing scene and not even know about it. There's a good chance that most of the players that you, the viewer, know of from the Southeast are probably from Georgia, specifically within the Atlanta metropolitan area. Most of the state's activity is hosted here, as well as most of its best players, the likes of which include Kola, Wrath, Fatality, Vendetta, Scat, and Sanito, all of whom have spent ample time amongst the best players that Ultimate has to offer. Needless to say, during seasons with active power rankings, they can usually be found at the top. The most recent PR on record for the Peach State also features some of the scene's newest up-and-coming talent, including Didi, one of Ultimate's most notorious Wi-Fi products, Teaser, the Texas transplant, and Omega, who rose through the ranks to become one of Georgia's strongest players post-lockdown. Rounding out the top 5 is the aforementioned Sanito, one of the country's top Sonics, and Mugen, formerly known as Hyper Kirby, one of the longest-tenured Roy believers dating back to his time in Smash for the Wii U. The back 5 of Georgia's power rankings are Jazzo, Jax, Danye, Kalen, and Joe, all of whom are no strangers to giving the best Georgia has to offer a run for their money. Mirroring the real world, Atlanta serves as one of the Southeast's biggest hubs for not only talent, but also tournaments, ranging from the weekly 404 weekly series on Thursday nights to the 404 monthly series in the same location. 2 of the US's most notable annual events are also hosted in the Atlanta area: MomoCon every May, with this year's edition coming up on Memorial Day weekend later this month, and DreamHack Atlanta, which takes place every fall. MomoCon 2022 is shaping up to be one of the perfect events to kick off the summer, with a star-studded roster of Tweaked, Buzz, Cosmos, Riddles, Louis Money, Goblin, Send, and many, many more in attendance. Naturally, Georgia's growing reputation as one of the strongest states in the country will be tested, and the state's first line of defense will be ready to step up to the plate. But don't be surprised to see even their lesser-known talent defend the region with pride. Going from the bustling scene of one of the country's biggest cities to the confines of the bayou, Louisiana is one of Ultimate's more interesting scenes. The infrastructure of Louisiana makes it almost unholy to travel north to south or vice versa. For reference, leaving from Shreveport, the third most populated city in the state, it's quicker to drive to Dallas, a major scene in a completely different state, than it is to get to New Orleans, Lafayette, or LSU's main campus in Baton Rouge, where most of the state's activity convenes. As if this wasn't a big enough obstacle for a good portion of Louisiana's player base, the state has been rocked by the effects of a scene-wide freeze that affects most of the state's driving forces long-term. They finally had enough activity to release their first power ranking in almost 2 years this past April. But, for what it's worth, it's pretty accurate to the current hierarchy of the state, minus the exclusion of 2 of the state's strongest players. See Falcon, who actually mains Joker and not Captain Falcon, and Brawler G31, who plays a mean ice climbers, but not me Brawler. Confusing, we know. Following a switch from Donkey Kong to Wario, Jordan, aka Brotherman, aka Hoodlife, has been putting himself and his state on the map in recent months, finishing in the top 32 at Pound 2022, nabbing wins over Pink Fresh and Bonk. As of this video, he sits at the top of the state's PR, with Zai, a Palutena main with a 33rd place finish at Let's Make Big Moves 2022, and a 17th at Low Tide City 2022 at 2nd, and Kirby Kid, Ultimate's top King K. Rool at number 3 in Louisiana. Louisiana's top 5 rounds out with a new addition, Malachite at 4th, and finally, RJ, whose real name isn't even RJ. What Come on. At this point, you should know better than to ask the Louisianians for logic. Default, Yat, Tully, Makin, and 51 Spitfire take up spots 6 through 10. As we alluded to before, Louisiana has had some pretty tough luck when it comes to building a scene. The prime location of most of their activity is perpetually at the mercy of Mother Nature, a certain virus has yet to leave their state alone, and they don't have the luxury of a MomoCon or DreamHack or CEO every calendar year. But they do their best to foster a healthy scene. Syphacon Mini in Lake Charles saw 253 entrants this past October, including out-of-state talent such as Cosmos, Larry Lur, Yanni, Nico, Lima, Goblin, and Mutace. And Lafayette, in particular, has been instrumental in holding down the fort, hosting a weekly, a monthly, and the Laffy, an invitational series in the city that aims to bring talent across the state together. Once protocols loosen up, community members in New Orleans and at LSU will be able to bring back 2 more crucial events for the scene, which will certainly help aid the efforts. Following the theme of university scenes, South Carolina has no shortage of them, and many of the state's top representatives either attend or live close to an active scene that has a college at its foundation. Many spectators are familiar with the state's best player, Peabnut, one of Ultimate's best Mega Man players. And if you aren't, you should be. With a list of wins including Cosmos, Goblin, Fatality, Kameme, Mr. R, and MVD, he's been the state's best player since the game's release at best, and tied for the title with Arfang, who was one of the country's best Pichu mains before moving away to New York to further pursue school at worst. However, life during quarantine shook up South Carolina a ton, giving way for some new faces and seeing some older names take serious strides over Wi-Fi. With Peabnut being given the number 0 spot due to local inactivity, taking over as the de facto number 1 player is Chunky. Not to be confused with Florida's Chunky Kong, SC's Chunky is a Wi-Fi product who leveled up a ton during quarantine, going from an average competitor to one of the best in the state and one of Wii Fit Trainer's most underrated representatives in roughly a year's time. They achieved this feat with the help of training partner Mortality, another player who saw their power level spike during quarantine. Donkey and Mortality both committed to the grind when events froze statewide, then premiered as numbers 1 and 2 on the South Carolina PR, the first time either of them has ever been ranked. South Carolina's number 3 player is someone who's no stranger to being ranked, in Mage, a Falco up-and-comer with sets over Crescent and Justice, who also helps coordinate one of Upstate's staple weeklies, Hidden Nest, hosted at Winthrop University on Friday nights. Right behind them is Adachi, a Luigi Steve co-main who has wins on Scat and Don Quavius under his belt, but not to be confused with Lunadachi, who resides at number 5 with Sephiroth, which undoubtedly makes things very interesting for TOs and commentators across the state. Frozen, also a talent scout for Phenoms Pro, sits at number 6, with Lol Yoshi, Fluxwaver, Psy, and Trent finishing off the most recent power rankings for the Palmetto State. Despite the physical distance between events, many of South Carolina's players will travel around the state and even over state lines to compete. The Clemson campus on the western end of the state will still pull in players from upstate and the Columbia areas for their weekly Clock Tower Smash on Thursdays, and especially for the Clemson Smash Series, their monthly event. Right across the border, the Tar Heel state features a burgeoning talent pool and enough steady events to provide both of the Carolinas with opportunities to duke it out. In addition to the state's weekly events taking place along the interstate, such as Smash Sans Frontiers and Smash at State in Raleigh, and Queen City Clash in Charlotte, the event organizers in North Carolina have been eager to host big events since the end of quarantine. Take Just Roll With It 13 this past November, which featured all of North and South Carolina's best, plus out-of-state talent like Lima, Puppe, Goblin, and Sonito. Even more recently than that, in February, was the Peabnut Formal, a charity event that saw the likes of Kola, Teaser, Sean, Moxie, and Anathema in attendance. North Carolina has been home to some prominent names in past Smash titles, but the newer generation refuses to be outdone in Ultimate. The state's newest power ranking is littered with phenomenal competitors, even in the absence of players like Toast, Mekos, and Don Quavius due to inactivity. Their newest number 1, Jigs, has been on a constant climb climbed to the mountaintop with Pikachu since the release of the game, and has finally cemented himself as the best player in the state for the time being. This revelation comes after an impressive campaign to start 2022, where Jigs placed first or second at half of the events they attended in our database, and even a surprise upset on Aaron at Glitch Infinite. Numbers 2 and 3 on the PR, Regalo and Sen, are no slouches either, combining to form a bit of a three-headed monster atop North Carolina's competitive scene, with all three players having extremely close set counts against the other two. Regalo's rise to prominence fills the Lucas-shaped void that Mekos left behind following his effective retirement from the game, and he's been holding up his end of the bargain in that regard, earning a set win over Lima and placing 3rd at Stick Drift 2, 9th at Just Roll With It 13th, and 49th at Super Smash Con Fall Fest. Sen's rise to prominence came after quarantine, although they've been competing since release. Their crowning achievement thus far in 2022 has to be their run at HobsCon 2, where they finished 3rd out of 112 entrants. But they also have a win over Peabnut at Keep It Real this past December, where they finished 5th. The North Carolina top 5 concludes with Mintos, a feisty Cloud Kazuya player with a win on Toast, and Magic, a French Inkling main who spent a few months studying abroad in Raleigh. By the time this video releases, they'll likely have made it back home to France safely, but this is a great reminder that the Smash scene is way bigger and way more connected than most people can even fathom, especially collegiately. If you need more proof to back up that claim, look no further than number 15 on the PR, Sugarland, a Fox main originally from the state of Oregon who won North Carolina's most recent Arcadian. The remainder of North Carolina's top 15 is where we find Deep Blue, Diet Soda, Crescent, Baname, and Buddha Bam, Furf, Frappe, Nas, and Seastream. To wrap up the southeast United States, we'll take a trip back to the deep south to get a closer look at two of the country's most underrepresented states, Alabama and Mississippi, starting with the former. Fun fact, the guy narrating this video lives in Alabama. From Ultimate's release, Alabama's visibility has ranged between poor and non-existent. A handful of their players have been able to make noises in scattered bursts, but nothing consistent enough to really direct the stage lights back in their scene's direction. Post-time skip, however, some members of the scene have started pulling in an admirable amount of dedication, slowly but surely building the necessary platform to broadcast their state's scene. This aligns perfectly with a regional event in Birmingham, Code Crimson, set to commence this weekend. Players from across the Southern Belt, such as Goblin, Scat, Jake, Sonito, Omega, Yosefu, Mugen, and Chili Chili, as well as out-of-region competitors like Doorstop and Mr. Eric, will all be convening in the state's capital, complete with an additional $1,000 in prize money. Code Crimson will hopefully carry on the momentum Alabama picked up to kick off the year with Blastoff 2022 in Huntsville. 184 entrants, including Kola, Sonito, Teaser, Omega, Dr. Copter, and most of Alabama's premier talent showed up for this one-day regional. And although Kola was able to crash the party, placing first at the event, one of Alabama's newest faces was able to place second, taking down Omega, Teaser, and even Kola himself. That player is Zurzel, a Min main from Texas who made the move to Alabama for school. He jumped up from number 4 in the fall 2021 season to number 1 to open up 2022, and performances like this make it clear why he was able to nab the top spot in such a short time. Second on the PR is Chili Chili, a veteran from Smash for Wii U. Although he has wins over Abadongo, Ned, and Mei, he was unranked last season due to inactivity. In his return, however, he used a mix of Mario and Pikachu to reinsert himself back into the hierarchy of Alabama's best, and should be able to continue the trend going forward, making for an interesting bout for the top spot in future seasons. At third is Murph, who briefly enjoyed some time as Alabama's number 1 player following the scene's return from quarantine. His Crom has given him decent national success, too, having sets on Pelka and Key under his belt, as well as a 49th place at Super Smash Con Fall Fest. Moppin and Kip complete the top 5 of Alabama's newly extended 15-man PR, with neither of the two being ranked lower than 5th at the end of any season thus far. Daniil, Demento, Deedles, Zero, Camerific, Melee, Physique, Cake, Strife, and MJY take up spots 6 through 15. Making our way over to the Magnolia State, Mississippi's scene is very close-knit and features a number of smaller subregions in the state's bigger cities. This, combined with COVID's everlasting effects of offline scenes, certainly does no favors to anyone attempting to nurture an active scene. But with that being said, the state's best players still make it a point to attend the larger events in the state when they do come up. Maroon Mayhem and Starkville and Colludium and Hattiesburg do a good job of tying in the state's various weeklies, such as Friday Night Fight, Heights, Square Up, and Warp Zone. Corinth Clash 3 took place back in January and was able to pull in 66 players from Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee, complete with a Mississippi vs. Alabama Grand Finals between the #1 Mississippi player, Yosefu, and the then #1 Alabama player, Murph. Going back a few months before this to last summer, we find an event by the name of Ecolution, Mississippi's most notable event of late. This tournament pulled 113 entrants, with the top 3 of this event each representing a different state. Georgia's Sonito with first, Mississippi's Ataraxia with second, and Alabama's Chili Chili with third. Despite placing second in an event this size, Ataraxia is nowhere to be found on the Mississippi PR for this past season due to inactivity. He was most recently #1 on the Fall 2019 PR prior to COVID, but now he has ceded that spot to Yosefu, who's actually ranked in both Tennessee and Mississippi. He's achieved this feat primarily with Simon Belmont, and has sets over Diet Soda, Ronan X, and Dr. Copter with the character, making him one of the country's more reputable Belmont players. He's tailed by DJ Soundwaves, who jumped up 5 spots this past season to #2 in the state following an impressive ranking season with a varied mix of zoners: Pac-Man, Min, Villager, and Steve. Miso is the state's newest up-and-coming prospect, debuting at #3 in Mississippi with Aegis and gathering wins over Yosefu and Cake. Laren, Mr. Man, Monsoon, Connor Sanders, Lil Goat, Scrafty, and Turkham 2 complete Mississippi's top 10, with an honorable mention to Dementio, no, not that one, for good measure. With Code Crimson and MomoCon 2022 coming up later this month, the rest of May is shaping up to be a big one for the Southeast. These tournaments will be huge opportunities for players like Jigs, Zurzel, Yosefu, and many more to make their marks on the national scene. And with the amount of talent in these scenes, the brackets are bound to be chaotic. To keep up with that action and everything else in the world of Smash, subscribe to PGstats. Thanks for watching. My name's Last. You can find me on Twitter at L4ST_V1. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.